I made out with the cop to ditch a ticket. He bailed me out and handed me packed bags. Hello, Reddit fam. My name is Karen, 25, female, married to Jimmy, 29, male, for 3 years now. We ran away from home and got married. It was like a movie about how we fell in love and how our families were against it, and how we decided to take off and live the life that we wanted to with each other. We have faced many challenges along the way, but our love has only grown stronger. Despite the obstacles, we are grateful for the life we have built together and wouldn't change a thing. I worked for an event management company making decent money while Jimmy was into a boring corporate job. He had fixed hours while I did not. There were days when we hardly saw each other. I think that was exactly what kept our romance alive even after being married for 3 years. Our different schedules allowed us to appreciate the time we did have together, making our relationship stronger. It added an element of excitement and anticipation to our time spent as a couple. I was running late for one of my events after having a fiery night with Jimmy. My alarm didn't go off on time, so I was in a rush. I quickly excited the house and was on the freeway to try to make it on time before the event started. I decided to ditch basic road rules and just rush as fast as I could. I was happy with the progress I was making and was even optimistic to reach on time. Suddenly, I jumped a red light and a cop car started chasing me. I decided to make the run and pray that he would eventually give up and leave me alone. Unfortunately, he chased me and asked me to step aside. I knew I was in trouble and regretted my decision to break the law. The officer approached my car with a stern expression, and I prepared myself for the consequences of my actions. I tried to come up with a fake story to try to convince the cop that I was in a genuine rush, but I guess my clothes were not going well with the story. I was dressed as if I was going to attend a rock concert, so there was no way the cop was buying my story. In the end, I had to admit that I was just running late and apologize for my mistake. I was expecting the cop to let me off with a warning for being honest, but instead he started putting in my details for a ticket. I knew that getting a ticket would mean that I might not be able to reach on time, and maybe not even be able to drive if I was stopped again. I was fully aware that there was no way that I could afford a ticket at this moment. I tried to plead and beg with him to try and see if there was any way that I could avoid getting a ticket. I even tried a little husky voice to flirt a bit. I was willing to do anything which works to get me off the hook. The cop took full advantage of me when I said that we could forget the ticket and settle it some other way. I initially thought that I would just flash him, and that would be enough. He asked me to take off my top as he wanted to see if what he saw would satisfy him enough to not give me a speeding ticket. I thought it was fair, and I did take off my top. I forgot that I was wearing a lacy bra, which hardly did a good job of covering my assets. He was overjoyed with the sight, so I thought that we would be done soon, but to my surprise, he asked me to take off my pants as well. I looked at him surprised, but he looked quite serious about it. I tried to argue that this was not what we agreed upon, so he asked me if I wanted a DUI and other charges added as well. I decided to shut up and comply with him. I was wearing a thong, which hardly left anything for imagination. He asked me to turn around and spanked me. Funnily enough, it actually aroused me and I enjoyed it. The cop roleplay was something that always turned me on. Here I was, getting spanked by a real cop. I guess he sensed that I was enjoying it, so he spanked me again. I was both surprised and glad that he did spank me again. I was hoping that this would be all and he would now let me be on my way. He grabbed my ass and pushed me onto the car seat. He held me so tight and started kissing me all over. I tried to resist, but after a point I started enjoying it as he was really good at making out. It took him just a few seconds to rip the rest of my clothes from our body, and before I could register, I was having sex on the highway in my car with the cop. It was the most unbelievable and bizarre scenario that could have ever happened in my entire life. Who would believe me even if I told someone about this? People would just assume that I am making up stories to make myself look cool and never accept that this actually happened. After we were done making out, the cop ordered me to dress myself and handcuffed me, asking me to follow him. I was still in my processing phase, where I was just trying to get back to my senses after all that steamy session that we had. I was expecting him to take me to his car and maybe have another round at it. To my surprise, as soon as I sat, he handcuffed me and took me to the station. The entire way I kept asking him what the hell was happening and why was he doing this to me. I did everything in my power to avoid getting a ticket, and he was still taking me to the station. I couldn't believe how quickly the situation had escalated, and I was left feeling confused and scared about what would happen next. Despite my attempts to reason with him, he remained silent and focused on getting me to the station as quickly as possible. After I was locked up, I sat down and started thinking of ways to get out of this situation. I finally remembered that I can make one call, so I decided to call my husband and ask him to get me out of prison. He looked worried and said that he would be there in a jiffy to get me out of there. I felt relieved and was getting impatient to get out as soon as possible. As I waited for my husband to arrive, I couldn't help but feel grateful for his support during this difficult time. Knowing he was on his way gave me hope that I would soon be free again. My husband completed the formalities and bailed me out after 6 long hours. I was a little pissed at him for taking so long to finally get me out. I gave a disapproving look to the cops while taking my belongings. I finally saw Jimmy and hugged him. He pulled me away, and I was expecting him to kiss me, but he was all cold towards me. I was a little puzzled as to why he would be angry at me for getting a ticket. The cop who made out with me looked at me with a smirk on his face as if he had something to do with all of this. It was as if he knew that Jimmy would react this way. I quickly realized that there was more going on than just a simple traffic ticket. As I tried to piece together the situation, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was some sort of connection between Jimmy's reaction and the cop's smug expression. It was all starting to feel like a setup. Once we reached home, Jimmy went straight to our room and started rummaging through my stuff. He came back sometime later and handed me packed bags and left without saying a word. I was left shell-shocked, unable to process what was happening. As I stood there in disbelief, I realized that Jimmy had packed my bags with all my stuff and asked me to leave. I couldn't believe that he would kick me out of our own home so suddenly. It was a harsh reality that I had to come to terms with, feeling hurt and betrayed by someone I thought I knew so well. I confronted Jimmy, asking him why he packed my bags and what he meant by goodbye. He told me that he looked at the dash cam footage of the car and saw me making out with the cop. I tried to explain to him that I did all of that just to avoid a ticket. He was obviously not buying my excuse, as it looked like I did it more out of my own will and not due to having no choice. He then proceeded to tell me that he couldn't trust me anymore and that our relationship was over. I felt devastated, realizing that my impulsive actions had irreparably damaged our trust and connection. I knew I had to take responsibility for my actions and work on rebuilding his trust, but I feared it may be too late. The consequences of my impulsive decision weighed heavily on me as I watched him walk away, knowing that I had lost something truly special. I held Jimmy's hand and asked him to look at me. I was the same person he was in love with. I was the same person with whom he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. How could he take such a rash decision by looking at something that was not even important? He was so stubborn that he was unwilling to listen to anything that I had to say to try to make him understand that what happened with the cop did not mean anything. I tried to reassure him that our love was stronger than any misunderstanding, but he remained distant. It hurt to see him shutting me out when all I wanted was to make things right between us. Even after trying so hard to explain the situation to Jimmy, he was unwilling to listen to anything that I had to say in my defense. He pushed my bags out of the house and asked me to leave. He said all he wanted was for me to leave him alone, as he was too heartbroken to listen to anything. I eventually gave in and decided that it was best for me to leave him alone to think about this with a calm mind, and maybe then he would be able to understand where I was coming from. I left his house feeling hurt and confused, but I knew that giving him space was the best option for both of us. Hopefully, with time and reflection, he would be open to hearing my side of the story. I left the house unwillingly and decided to stay at a hotel for the time being. I was very confident that Jimmy would call me back and ask me to come home once he was not upset anymore. I decided to take advantage of this opportunity and give myself a relaxing day, which was much needed. I was so burnt out from all the work that I had been doing for the past couple of weeks that I needed some time to relax and rejuvenate. I felt like this was the perfect opportunity for me to pamper myself, so it was not a bad thing that Jimmy was mad at me. I booked a spa day and treated myself to a massage and facial. It was exactly what I needed to recharge and feel refreshed. I knew that taking care of myself was important in order to be able to handle any future challenges that may come my way. The next day, I was desperately waiting for Jimmy's call asking me to come back home. It was almost evening, but I never received a call or a message from Jimmy. I concluded that I did not have to wait for him to ask me to come home. It was our house, and I did not need an invitation from anyone. I started my car and drove home. The house was locked, and I could see a few more bags on the crib. I did not know that Jimmy was clearing out stuff to donate. I decided to see if there was something useful from all the stuff which he was throwing out. All the stuff belonged to me, and it was even more surprising as Jimmy never touched my things. I had a sinking feeling in my heart as I kept rummaging through the boxes that all this was not for donation, but for me to pick up. I realized that Jimmy must have been trying to send me a message, but I couldn't figure out what it was. As I continued searching through the boxes, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in. Jimmy was trying to get rid of my belongings without directly confronting me. It made me feel hurt and betrayed, wondering why he didn't just talk to me about it. Jimmy could not have been serious about asking me to leave. How could he take such an impulsive decision before having a discussion with me? I decided to wait for him to get home so that we could have a proper conversation about this. I mean, how could he even think about shutting me out of his life for a silly action to get me out of trouble? Jimmy knew exactly the situation with my license was, and there was no way I could afford getting another ticket. It would have meant my license being canceled, so you know exactly why I had to make out with the cop. Why he was behaving this way was something that was difficult for me to understand. I needed to explain to him the gravity of the situation and make him understand my actions were out of desperation. Hopefully, he would see things from my perspective, and we could move past this misunderstanding. I tried to get onto the house, but to my surprise, the locks were changed, and there was no way for me to access the house. Of course, I was angry and decided to wait in the car for Jimmy to get home. I saw his car enter the driveway out of my car to stop him before he went inside. He wasn't alone, but with some blonde chick, which was again a surprise. I ran behind him and asked him what was going on. He said that thank God I was here and he wanted me to pick up my stuff now that I was there. I just looked at him in disbelief. I told him that I needed an explanation as to what was happening. Why was he being so cold towards me, and what's with all the indifference? And who the hell was this girl with him? He explained that he had moved on and found someone new, and that it was time for me to do the same. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I knew it was time to let go and move forward with my life. Jimmy asked me to get inside the house so that we could discuss everything once and for all. He wanted me to be on my way after this conversation and never bother him again. I did not want to create a scene, so I followed him inside to see what he had to say about his changed behavior. He asked the girl to give us some privacy and make ourselves comfortable till the time we had a discussion. She made her way straight to our bedroom, which was another shocking thing that I had seen today. I decided to ignore it for now and focus on my conversation with Jimmy. Jimmy asked me to take a seat and not interrupt him while he finished what he had to say. I sat down and waited patiently for him to talk. He told me that his behavior towards me was not just because I made out with a cop to get out of trouble. His behavior has changed because he has realized that he no longer has feelings for me. He had now come to know that he was with me just because it made him feel comfortable. After spending some time apart due to our drastic schedules, he realized that he is better off without me. He had been meaning to tell me this for a long time, but never got the opportunity to do so. He finally mustered up the courage to have an honest conversation with me, expressing his feelings and decision to end things. It was a difficult realization for both of us, but ultimately necessary for our individual growth and happiness. I just kept staring at him as I was speechless. I don't know what to say to his revelation. He continued that since we had never had the opportunity to be with anybody else, he was not sure what he was missing out on. He wanted to try and be with other people and see if being with them would make him happier than he was with me. He said that he had been forcing himself to be happy all this while, then he actually wasn't really feeling happy from the inside. I felt a mix of shock and sadness at his words, realizing that our relationship was not as strong as I had believed. It was clear that we were at a crossroads, and I knew that I needed to come to terms with the fact that he was questioning our future together. After looking at the dash cam footage, it was obvious that he was angry and decided that it was time for him to spill what was on his mind for a long time. He took advantage of this opportunity and asked me to move out. The day when he was alone, he went on a few dates and actually liked talking to other people for a change. He made up his mind that he would give himself a chance to explore and find out who would be the best person for him. He realized that he needed to prioritize his own happiness and take steps towards personal growth. According to him, our relationship had gone stale for a long time. It took me so much time to actually notice it because I was so engrossed with my work. I was so selfish that I did not even realize how unhappy he had been for the past couple of months. He told me that he had nothing against me apart from me making out with the cop, which was wrong, but he was willing to forgive me for it if I agreed to part ways. He expressed that he needed space to focus on himself and his own happiness, and that he believed it was best for both of us to move on. I realized then that I had neglected our relationship, and I needed to take responsibility for my actions. He looked at me and asked me to say what I had to say. It was difficult for me to process everything that he had just spoken about. I never knew that Jimmy was not happy in this marriage. How could he even think of dating other people and exploring options to see who makes him happy? I was very sure that I was the only one who knew him inside out and who could make him happy. I felt hurt and confused, wondering if I had missed any signs of his unhappiness. Was I not enough for him after all these years? My mind raced with questions as I struggled to come to terms with the situation. I asked him if the girl he was with right now made him happy. He told me that he had been with her for just one day now, and for the time being, yes, he really likes spending time with her. How to react, I do not know to this situation. I have never been at such a loss of words, especially with Jimmy. I can't help but feel a sense of unease and confusion about his sudden change in behavior. It's difficult to see someone you care about in a new light, especially when it catches you off guard. I begged him not to act this way and think with a clear mind. I was willing to ask him to take his own time, and if he wanted some distance, we could do that as well. But this could not be the reason that we separate. I emphasized the importance of communication and finding a solution together, rather than making impulsive decisions. I hoped he would consider our relationship and the potential for growth and understanding. Jimmy told me that there was something else that was bothering him, but he did not want to bring it up and separate on good terms, but I was leaving him no choice. I was intrigued, so I asked him if I should stop at such vague answers and spit out what he had actually been meaning to say. Jimmy hesitated for a moment before finally confessing that he felt unappreciated in our relationship and needed more emotional support from me. This opened up a much-needed conversation between us about how we could better communicate and support each other moving forward. It had been a while since he had been finding me emotionally unavailable for him. He asked me if I remembered one of the concerts that I was managing where I had asked him to try and attend. I changed my mind at the very end and asked him not to come because everything was such a mess and it was all chaotic. I told him I did not know where he was going with all of this. He said that he did come because I wanted him to be there, but he was not expecting to see me in such a condition. I tried to recollect the incident he was talking about, and I finally realized what he must have seen. I knew at that instant that maybe there was no way of saving this relationship. I remember being shortlisted to host a concert for one of my favorite bands. I was over the moon and really wanted Jimmy to be there so that we could attend the concert together. I left him a message letting him know how excited I was to be organizing an event for my favorite singers, and also being able to watch them perform up close. I hoped that Jimmy would be able to make it and share the experience with me. The thought of us enjoying the music together made me even more thrilled for the upcoming event. I was backstage making sure that everything was flawless, so that there were no issues while the band was performing. Out of nowhere, one of the band members walked up to me and started flirting with me. Obviously, I do not want to miss this opportunity, so I floated back. One thing led to another, and he invited me to his changing room. I could not believe that I was going to be making out with our celebrity. I did not even hesitate and took this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make out with him. Now I know the reason why Jimmy was not talking to me for a few days after this concert. I thought he was just overworked and wanted to rest, but now I knew the real reason behind it. It was a thrilling experience that I will never forget, even though it may have caused some tension in my relationship with Jimmy. The memory of that unexpected encounter with the celebrity will always stay with me. I never imagined that my impulsive decision would have such consequences, but I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and guilt. It was a thrilling experience, but it definitely made things awkward between Jimmy and me afterwards. He kept staring at me and looking at my expression. He understood that I had realized what he was talking about. He said that he was there because he wanted to surprise me and support me. He had come backstage to let me know that he would always be there for me no matter what. When he came looking for me, he saw me kissing someone. He was about to come and punch the guy, thinking that he was forcing himself on me, but when I started kissing him back, his heart sank and he decided to leave. He realized that I had found someone new and exciting to spend time with. His surprise turned into heartbreak as he quietly left, knowing that I no longer needed his support in that way. He said that when he saw my messages, where I told him to not come as things were quite hectic, he knew at that instant that I was willing to hide this from him. At that point, he decided that I did not value our marriage enough to come clean or even hesitate before making out with another person. He was just waiting for me all this while to come clean, but I never did. I never knew that he had seen me making out, so I decided that I would keep this secret and take it to my grave. I loved him and did not want to complicate this relationship when all that meant nothing. It was not like I was having an affair. It was just an opportunity that I grabbed. Now when I think back, I was wrong to think that way. I should have been honest with him from the beginning and faced the consequences of my actions. Keeping this secret only caused more harm in the end. He said that making out with the cop further solidified his belief that I did not value him or this marriage. When he looked at the dashcam footage, it did not look like I was not enjoying it or I was being forced to make out with the cop. It looked like I had been trying my best to seduce the cop to make out with me. This had helped him realize that he was taking the right decision by pushing me out of his life. He understood that he deserved someone much better than me. He decided that our marriage was over and that he deserved to be with someone who valued and respected him. It was a painful realization, but he knew it was the best decision for his own happiness and well-being. He decided that it was time to move on and find someone who truly appreciated him. Reflecting on the situation, he knew he deserved a partner who respected and valued their relationship. I sat there just listening to him, as I had no words to justify my actions. I knew that what I did was wrong and hurtful on so many levels. It was also clear that nothing I say or do is going to help Jimmy change his decision. No matter how much I apologize, I knew that he was already gone. I realized that I needed to accept the consequences of my actions and focus on learning from this experience. Moving forward, I vowed to make better choices and treat others with more kindness and respect. In the end, I am left with nothing but loneliness and regret. A single mistake from my end led to such a drastic change in my life. My husband, Jimmy, who I wanted to spend my entire life with, ended our relationship so brutally that I don't see any way of reconciliation. I never pictured a day without Jimmy in my life. Here I was all heartbroken and living in guilt. Now my life is filled with ifs and maybes. I don't know how I'm going to pull myself out of this situation and put myself out there. It will be a difficult and lonely journey going forward. To everyone out there, I would request you to be honest and share everything with your partners, even if it means to hurt them temporarily. It would at least not result in the end of a beautiful relationship. Please value the people you are with and don't take them for granted, or else you will end up like me. Communication is key in any relationship, and honesty is the foundation of trust. It's better to address issues head-on rather than let them fester and potentially lead to the demise of a meaningful connection. Thank you all for being so kind and listening to my story. Hope you learned something from it. Thank you for all the love and support.